history of ceramics is literally human history, and even prehistory, prehistoric ceramics. Things made out of clay are among the first things humans made. Somewhere somebody saw some clay that went through a fire or a volcano or something and figured out, how to do this. So, but I'm gonna skip way, way ahead to Chinese porcelain. This is where Majolica starts. Majolica starts with Chinese porcelain, and the part you're looking at might not really be old enough, but I picked it because it's just so great that it's the one that I wanted you to see. But you have to try to understand that this is the space shuttle supercomputer cool iPhone of its day. There was nothing like this anywhere else in the world. They were so precious. This became, in Europe, the most precious material in the world. Battles were fought over a single piece of Chinese porcelain. Like armies would get together and fight over this bowl because they couldn't figure out how to get a kiln to these temperatures. And they certainly didn't have the clay. They didn't have the white clay. So, when this started to come to Europe, filtering through, I don't know, Marco Polo or something. By the way, anything that I tell you today, don't hold me to, because, I'm not, I don't have a degree in the history of ceramics, but it is something that I think is very important. So, when this gets to Europe, and people are realizing this is really important, and apparently royalty and, whoever the wealthy want things that are made out of white clay. But we don't have any white clay. In Turkey, they figure out how to put a white glaze or a white slip and then like a lead glaze over the red clay. And maybe this clay is even buff. What do you think, isn't it?
Yeah, like buff or brown or anything.
So these are two pots that are made in a little village in Turkey called Iznik. And this one is at the Met. You know what? This one might be at the Met too. It's not a great print of it. But these are among our favorite objects in the world. This thing is a work of absolute genius. Just the painting alone. And these things filter through to Europe through the island of Majorca. This is where we get the word Majolica from. These pots start arriving in Italy from Majorca, and they start to call them Majolica. And then some Italian potter figures out that he can take his red clay and put a white glaze over it. And then somebody figures out that they can paint over this white glaze, and it's maybe even a little better than this white clay. Although the white clay, the Chinese porcelain, is still extremely precious. But the painting they start to do, because between what's happening in the potteries and then, what's happening in the Italian Renaissance in painting and sculpture, start to, they're both looking at each other. This one I put in, this is a pharmacy jar, and these are really the prime examples you're ever going to find about decoration and form meeting and blending together. And the form is all about having a row of these on the pharmacy shelf or the apothecary's shelf so that, you could grab it, take it off the shelf, probably had a cork lid or a cork stopper, and take them off. And then this was a misprint. So some of you have one guy, and some of you probably have another guy because they were supposed to print two, but I did not work that out well. But just look at the way he fits. His face fits onto that form. They had this very clear, whatever potter did this, and I like to think that the potter was also the painter, but really just either naturally or somebody taught him, I don't even know how, but understood how to stretch this guy out so that he looks very much like he belongs on this pot. I'm trying to get to this one piece, which So, and I'm gonna go through these pretty fast. She left me. As we go forward in Italy in the Italian Renaissance, the painting on these pots becomes more and more sophisticated. The geometric design on this bowl, which would definitely be something that, you know, as we go forward, Janice would definitely go to. So like, when we were looking at, when we go to museums and stuff, I would take this and I'd say, you know, we should do something like that. And then she would tell me about how much time it's gonna take, you know. Because as you can see, we're already taking a lot of time with our work. But I mean, just look at that. You know, don't you want this bowl, like, right? Everybody here wants this bowl in their kitchen.
No, but you don't have to make it.
And then this one's not even for eating on, but, you know, then, and when you really start to go, if you go to the Met and you go to the back of the Met, if you just, from the Grand Hall of the Met, by the way, I think I want to offer just like a tour of the Met, so if anybody wants to join me at the Met sometime, ask Barbara to arrange it. I'll tour you around the Met. We could do a ceramics tour of the Met.
That would be fabulous, yeah.
It's funny, I was walking around the Met a couple of weeks ago with my nephew, and I'm saying, no, we gotta go this way, we have to do this, and because there was a David Hockney show at the Met, I don't know if anybody saw it, but wasn't it great? And he's like, you really know your way around here. It's like my second home. But anyway, this piece is in the Met, and the thing about Majolica is that the subject matter starts to get really, you know, I don't know if it's risque, but this guy is getting eaten by a snake. And, you know, it's like several hundred years. This is I think this guy is the prodigal son. Prodigal son, right? The red guy, the guy with the red bulb.
Possibly, I have to look at all the symbolism.
Anyway, this is the one piece of Majolica that the Met has on its, like on a postcard. And I think it might be on the cover of a book. And you'll see this in the Lehman collection. You get to the Lehman collection, when you go into the Met, in the Grand Hall, you just go straight back through the Middle Ages and you go to the back, and the Lehman collection has its own wing. And there are Van Goghs there, and there's one of my favorite paintings. It's on the cover of the Met's new painting book, this woman in blue. It's an Ingra or Ang. If you go to the Met, you should visit the Ang, this, I don't even know her name, but the woman in the blue dress. Then I put in, I see that a lot of people are already up to the Della Robia. This is, I'm forgetting his first name. Luca Della Robia, who is an Italian Renaissance sculptor, except he's working in clay and he's working in Majolica. And who was I talking about with the lemons? Because here you can see he fills his borders and things with lemons. And so this is really, and I was gonna bring a Della Robia book. I had it sitting on the kitchen table. I took it out of the library, Saratoga Library. It's a new book. I think there must have been an exhibit somewhere of Della Robia. But this is the beginning of painted sculpture. Well, maybe not, because there's the Chinese army, the Chinese soldiers. Those were painted. You guys, did you know that? They were like these bright colors. But anyway, Della Robia is putting Majolica on his sculptures and, you know, painting them, which is pretty incredible. I don't know enough about him. I have to learn it. So this piece was the cause of many arguments, because I used to want Janice to paint our pots like this. Yeah, we didn't always argue. We're still together. It's a long time.
Comic relief.
Yeah, well, it's funny.
Yeah.
But she always thought that I wanted her to paint Europa and the Bull. I didn't really want her to paint Europa and the Bull. I just wanted her to paint, like, you know, paintings. Because, I mean, this pot, first of all, this is a wine ewer. And this, by the way, at this point, after Della Robia, at this point, Majolica finds its way into France. This is French, from a village called Neves. I think it's Nevres. And it's I don't know, this big. This is a big pot. And you know that you just want to have somebody pour you wine out of this pot, right? And that the wine that was poured out of this pot before it found its way to the Met is really good. And it's got this sculpted ram here and this beautiful snake handle. And it's just this great pot. I was never able to achieve this, but it's like, this is one of my dream pieces. And this one, I don't even know if this is really Majolica, but I was just trying to bring up that we were looking at, somebody was looking at one of these books with me, and we saw a Walter Ostrom. Walter Ostrom's from Nova Scotia, and was the teacher in Halifax. And he also used to color his Majolica. We didn't really talk about that because we never do it. But you can take like a yellow stain, you can make like a butter-colored Majolica, and you can still paint over it, but like a buttery Majolica with just the terracige go really nicely together. And maybe we should have done that, because that would have made our lives so much easier. You know, but I think that this might be yellow, like a Majolica where the glaze is colored. And I also showed this one because this pot is just brilliant. So if you want something to hang out. Now this is the one that, you know, my daughter must have helped make this packet. This is the one that I'm going to spend the most time with. This is my favorite ceramic story to tell my ceramic students. But this is French, and this is, for anybody who knows anything about making pottery, this is insane. This is an act of complete craziness. So just take a look. Right here, the middle thing with this little fish on it, that's a lid. Okay, that's a little ink well there. And then these two parts on the side, those are also lids. Then you've got this top part here with this guy in the middle and two, not for nothing, but two candlesticks. Also a lid that comes off, and there's a box on the inside. Then these two parts on the bottom here, drawers. Clay drawers. Has anybody here ever tried to make a clay drawer? Okay, so why is it so completely insane? Oh, and the little things with the hole for holding, you know, quills. Okay, so imagine that you make this thing. How long does it take? It takes like a week, right? Between 3 days and a week to make it. And then you set it aside and it dries and the drawers fit and the lids don't crack and none of these little balustrade things, did you notice the balustrade? None of it cracks and it's perfect. Then you're going to take this thing and you're going to put it in a kiln and make it red hot, right? Which is, if you think about it, right, it's nuts. Then you take it out and it hasn't cracked, it hasn't broke, and the drawers still fit, right? And the lids still fit. And then you're going to take it and you're going to dunk it in this, right, in this liquid. You take the whole thing and you just...
Can you imagine dunking that? I don't know.
And then you're not done, right? Then you clean up all the glaze, which probably takes the better part of a day, right? You get it all nice and clean. Oh, by the way, in the back of it, there's a secret drawer in the back. Okay? Then you're going to paint it. Now, if you look at the painting on this thing, think about how long that took. And the insides of the drawers, not for nothing, but we once saw it where it was disassembled. And the inside of the drawers are painted with what belongs in the drawers. There are these pictures.
Of like little pens or...
And then you're going to put it back in the oven where it will eventually come out perfect. And then it lands in the Metropolitan Museum where they keep it in a closet and don't show it to anyone.
This is the life of the ceramic artist. For the ages.
Right, if you know about ceramics, you understand that
And
you
they don't
have
even
got
have
to
a
be...
name on it. They didn't sign it or anything, huh?
I don't know.
It's,
I
you
don't
know what, it
think
just
so. It's
says,
like from this-
French tin glazed.
Yeah.
It's called an écoutoir. This one, we're kind of going back in time because this one is Italian. And this one is even more crazy. This part right here where this woman is standing, this whole thing is a lid. And when I saw it, and if you turn to the next picture, this is my photograph. They had the drawer open during this show. And I wish I could have shown you this other picture, but I didn't get them to print. But the inside of this drawer is decorated, and this lid is off just a little bit, and you can see that inside this are 4 more boxes, lidded boxes, these beautiful little boxes, completely decorated, completely painted. There's a drawer on the back of this thing. It's, I mean, you know, somebody at some point had this on their desk, and it was like one of their things that they owned, that they could live with. You know, I have to go to the Met to visit it. So I don't know how many of you have. Some of you have a detail of it, but just to consider that they took the time, about this big, to paint this little, is it a Pegasus or a unicorn?
Yeah,
It's a Pegasus. To paint this perfect painting of a Pegasus on this little, this medallion, which, you know, think about this. First they had to make the medallion, right? They had to sculpt it and carve it and get it perfect. Then we talk about Delft. In the town of Delft, Majolica finds its way, and I'm not sure why, but for some reason, the Dutch only wanted their Majolica to be blue and white. Maybe they thought it looked more Chinese.
Yeah.
More Chinese, right?
Yeah, the blue.
But
and
this
white.
thing, this
There's
thing
one
is a,
color that's good. And if you're gonna pick a color, why shouldn't it be blue?
Yeah.
this thing is a tulipiere. We used to make tulipieres, but each one of these, where there's a line, that's a lid. So these are just a bunch of lids or little pots that sit on top of each other, and these little holes all take flowers. So all of these things come apart. All of them had to be made and fired and painted. So I think, sometimes I like to think that for potters doing Majolica, there's an extra amount of nuttiness. And then we come to this guy. This is back to France. And this is, I don't know where I learned this. And don't hold me to this, but I'm pretty sure this is true. This is Majolica. A lot of people ask me, what's the difference between Majolica and Majolica? Majolica is a white glaze on a red clay. That's my rule of thumb. Majolica is a white low-fire clay with colored glazes.
And like a, yeah.
So, and this is
So
not
it's
even a
not the
Bernard.
opaque glaze.
Right, this is not even a Bernard Palissy. This is either after Bernard Palissy or the school of Bernard Palissy. But Bernard Palissy would take, you know, frogs and snakes and leaves and cast them. I don't know if they were alive or what, but actual frogs, and like, so this snake is an actual snake that was cast. And then, you know, do all of this glazing. There's a story. Can I tell it that story?
I don't know the story, so you can tell it.
There's a story where
Non-censored.
he was firing a kiln, and his kiln wasn't getting temperature, and he ran into his house and started grabbing furniture, woke his wife up, get out of the bed because he had to break it up and throw it into the kiln. Because I don't know if you know what it's like to not have a kiln get the temperature, but it's urgent. You know, you have to do something. And then I gave you just a couple of. This is Ann Krause. She went to, I think she went the Alfred, Kansas City route. She passed away very young, she was in her 30s. But this is like a contemporary piece of Majolica, and just one of the great Majolica artists ever. We never met her, but a friend of ours. We didn't give him the Chuck Apple piece, did we?
Oh, no, I was gonna do it.
But she influenced a lot of Majolica artists. This is our teacher, Andrea Gill. And Andrea, these pots are large. And I never saw her glaze one, but she says she used to spray, she used to have like a spray bottle, and she used to spray the Majolica on, and then I don't know if she sanded it or how she does it, but what we've shown you, there's no hard and fast rules about how to do this. I mean, Andrea, you know, would make these big pots, and she needed to figure out a way to get the Majolica on it, and you know, you set yourself a problem, and then you figure out the problem, and that's when the good art really starts to happen.